Hi, and welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore, founder of foodtrucktraining.group. The topic of costing a menu comes up frequently, and many folks attempt to be helpful, offering good advice. However, there's always one nut that adds in a couple of really dumb things and tell you got to include that to do your menu price. They'll say add in the labor it takes to make it, and they'll say add in the propane. Well, you can't do either, and I'm going to explain to you why it's impossible. First of all, when someone says that to you, it indicates they have a retail mindset rather than a production mindset. Our business is a production and assembly business of perishable items. So we are on a time-bound situation when it comes to our food. We have to prepare it, we have to sell it before it goes bad. We don't buy hardline items and set them on a showroom floor waiting for them to sell because they don't have an expiration. So we can't price our stuff like Sears or JCPenney's does. If we do, we end up being just like them. We're hiding from bankruptcy and we're selling off assets to pay bills. Food is different than retail industry. And a lot of people don't know the difference because they teach retail accounting in accounting, but restaurant accounting is different. In food world, there are two types of labor. You have indirect labor, you have direct labor. Indirect is prep time. It's also cleanup time. You're not directly dealing with guests, but you're preparing for them, or you are preparing for things that happened after they've left. You're cleaning up, for instance. It's important work, but it can't be directly tied to sales because it happens again before a sale or after a sale. Whether you sell 10 items or 1,000 items, the cleanup time takes about the same amount of time. You may have a few more pots and pans, but the floor space is still exactly the same size for sweeping, scrubbing, and mopping. The hood vents are still the same size, the griddle's still the same size, the fryer's still the same size, so they all take the same amount of time to clean, whether you have been super busy or super slow. Direct labor is the labor when we take care of a guest. And every truck has a cooking capacity, and it also has a serving capacity. We can extend our serving capacity just by adding on more people in the proper positions, being able to take more orders at one time, being able to cook more food at one time. But there is a cooking capacity and it's a hard limit no matter how many employees we add. If your fryer can only cook 45 pounds of fries an hour, it can only cook 45 pounds of fries an hour no matter how many employees you add on. So you have that hard limit there. Neither of the two labor types, again, indirect and direct, is added to the cost of ingredients when you price a menu. They're both covered by the gross profit that remains. Gross profit is revenue. So revenue is your menu price times the number of items you sold. That's your top line revenue. Then you subtract what it costs you to produce that revenue in ingredients, in food, and that leaves you a number. It's referred to as gross profit. The gross profit pays for everything else that you have as an expense in your food truck. So let's take an example. A $2 ingredient cost, we're going to sell it for $8. I teach people you take that $2 ingredient cost, multiply it times 4, gives you $8. So using our gross profit example, that would leave $6 in gross profit. That $6 contributes to paying for that little teeny tiny bit of labor it took to make that product, to prep it and to cook it. It's going to pay for a little teeny tiny bit of the licenses, the insurance, the cell phone, the commissary bill, propane bill, the gasoline it took you to get there. It's paying its share, so it's a little teeny tiny bit. Now the food cost on that is 25%. $2 in ingredient cost divided by the $8 we have in a menu price leaves us a 25% food cost. Fairly simple. But if you pretend like you can quantify labor used to prep, cook, hold, and assemble a product and say, hey, I think I'll add 50 cents to cover my labor, the menu price you just changed also changes the food cost. So now you've taken the food cost down to 23.52. And when you go to figure things, it's like, well, wait, I don't understand. Why is this lower than it should be? Why does it not match up with the 25% that I have set as a goal? Food cost is a separate line item expense on your profit and loss statement. Labor, amazingly, has its own line on the profit and loss statement, as does propane. So you got to think about labor. It's consumed as time passes, whether you sell 2 items or 200. When you add in labor to pricing, the menu pricing, it makes both the food and labor targets a moving budget. If you tried to program that in on an Excel spreadsheet, you would get an error. you would get the circular formula error because one is dependent upon the other. When you try to do the math by dividing it out, you created a circle. Think about that labor statement I just made. Labor is consumed as time passes. So technically you could sell nothing for the day, but you still have a labor cost. So your food isn't consumed, so it's still there. You can store it and use it tomorrow. So you have a zero food cost, but you have a labor cost. And if you're cooking, you're consuming propane. So you have a propane cost for that particular day. So you can't add those into the ingredients and pretend like you're figuring out a cost for those, because you're not. Again, they are covered by the gross profit, and that's why companies figure gross profit in the first place. So let's take the example further, because I know there's going to be somebody try to debate me on this. Let's say your labor cost is $30 an hour. How much do you add to your menu to cover the labor if you sell $100 that hour? Well, it's 30 cents. Pretty simple math. Okay, so what if you sell 200 items? It's 15 cents. But tell me, how much are you adding if you only sell one of those items an hour? Are you changing your price to be $30? No, you're not. Labor is a variable cost, and it stands alone on a profit and loss statement. Propane is a fixed cost. It also stands alone on your profit and loss statement. If those were included in with the food cost, they wouldn't have their own line on your profit and loss statement. So anybody that tells you add in a little bit for labor doesn't understand how labor works. Anybody that says add in a little bit for propane also doesn't understand how propane consumption works. The bottom line, when someone attempts to mislead you by saying figure in your labor or figure in your propane, they don't know what they're talking about. They're giving you bad advice on that subject. Think about it. How valuable do you think anything else they're going to say will be? Simply because you own a food truck does not make you an expert. It makes you a student wanting to get better. But if you don't pay attention to people that have walked the road before you, people that have been trained to do things correctly, to generate a whole bunch of sales, to generate a whole bunch of profit, you're not going to make profit yourself. Thank you guys so much for listening. I certainly hope you are finding all the information on these podcasts useful in your food truck business. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider hitting the support button or click on one of the links in the description below and give us any kind of support you possibly can. Every little bit does help, and I cherish anything you guys are able to do. If you love being around like-minded positive people, join our Facebook group. It is called Food Truck Training. There you're going to find a whole bunch of information. You're going to find support and inspiration from the awesome members. You guys have a great day. Come back tomorrow. I'll have another topic.